The last goodbye. The rain had been falling since morning, a quiet rhythm against the glass that made the world outside look blurred, like a painting someone had smudged with trembling hands. Inside the small Portland cafe, the scent of cinnamon and roasted coffee beans hung heavy in the air. Candles flickered on every table, their flames bending gently whenever the door opened to let in another gust of wind. Alyssa sat by the window, her fingers tracing invisible circles on her cup. The warmth of the mug couldn't reach the coldness she felt spreading through her chest. It was her birthday, yet the word celebration felt foreign now, too fragile for the truth hidden beneath the smiles. Her husband, Mark, sat across from her, his easy grin in place, the one that used to make her heart skip, now only tightening something inside her. Their son, Ethan, had helped light the candle on the small chocolate cake the waiter brought out. Everyone had clapped politely. Mark had kissed her cheek, and for that single, rehearsed second, it had looked like a family's love. But Alyssa knew better. She'd spent years knowing better, smiling through the cracks, pretending the bruises on her soul didn't ache, pretending Mark's sharp words were just stress, pretending that someday he'd go back to the man she married. Tonight, though, she wasn't pretending. When the waiter refilled their glasses, Alyssa's eyes drifted to the window again. Raindrops raced down the glass, colliding and merging like memories too heavy to hold apart. In her purse sat the letter, crisp, folded, waiting. The letter that would end the life she'd built around lies. Something wrong? Mark asked, his tone casual but lined with control. She looked up, forcing a smile. Just tired. It's been a long week. He nodded, eyes narrowing slightly, the way they always did when he tried to read her. But this time, she didn't look away. She held his gaze, steady, unflinching, a storm rising behind quiet eyes. When Ethan ran off to show the waitress his drawing, Alyssa finally spoke. Mark, there's something I need to say. He smirked, leaning back. Can it wait till we get home? She shook her head slowly. No. It can't. There was a pause. The cafe hummed softly around them, spoons clinking, low laughter, the sound of life continuing while hers was about to change forever. I'm leaving, she said simply. Mark's smile froze. What? I've found a new apartment. Ethan and I will move tomorrow morning. The air between them grew thick. Mark's fingers tightened around his glass. You're not taking my son anywhere. Alyssa's heart thudded, but her voice didn't shake. He's our son. And he deserves a home where silence doesn't mean danger. Mark's face darkened. You think you can survive without me? She almost laughed, a quiet, hollow sound. I already have. Before he could speak again, Ethan came running back, waving his drawing. Look, Mommy. Alyssa bent down, smiling at him, a real smile this time. It's beautiful, sweetheart. For a second, she thought she saw confusion flicker in Mark's eyes, or maybe fear. But she didn't care anymore. Her world no longer revolved around what he felt. When the cake was gone and the plates cleared, Mark excused himself to the restroom. Alyssa knew this was her moment. She pulled the folded envelope from her purse and placed it on the table. No name, no explanation. Just a quiet end to years of chaos. The letter said everything she couldn't. For years, I tried to be the woman you wanted. But I forgot the woman I was. You won't find me again, Mark. Not in the places you controlled, not in the silence you built. By the time you read this, Ethan and I will be gone, free, safe, and alive. Goodbye. When she stood, her knees trembled, but her steps were steady. She reached for Ethan's hand. He looked up at her, puzzled but trusting. Where are we going, Mommy? He asked softly. Alyssa smiled, her voice trembling with both fear and hope. Somewhere new, baby. Somewhere the rain doesn't sound sad anymore. They stepped out into the storm. The rain soaked her hair, blurred the streetlights, but she didn't stop walking. Each drop felt like cleansing, washing away years of pain, of control, of fear. Behind them, in the cafe, Mark returned to an empty seat and an unopened letter. Outside, Alyssa crossed the street, holding her son close as the wind howled around them. For the first time in years, she didn't feel small. She didn't feel trapped. She felt alive. Ethan squeezed her hand. Mommy? Yes, baby? Are we free now? She looked down, her tears mixing with the rain, and whispered, Yes, sweetheart. We're free. And as they disappeared down the wet street, the city lights shimmered on the puddles like promises, fragile, fleeting, but real. For the first time, the storm didn't scare her. It sang to her, it sang of beginnings. 3 years had passed since that night, the night Alyssa walked out of the cafe and never looked back. Seattle had become home in the quietest of ways. Not because it was perfect, but because it allowed her to breathe. The smell of salt from the nearby bay, the soft murmur of gulls in the morning, the rhythmic rain tapping on her window, they were all reminders that peace could be ordinary and still beautiful. Her small apartment overlooked the harbor now. She'd saved every dollar she could from her job at the bookstore, and when the owner retired, Alyssa took a chance. She bought the place with trembling hands and an unshakable will. The sign above the door now read, "Second Chances Books and Coffee." The name wasn't random. It was a promise. Every week, she hosted a support circle in the back corner, women from all walks of life who came with stories that began in darkness and ended in hope. They'd sit with steaming cups of tea, sometimes crying, sometimes laughing, sometimes silent. Alyssa never preached. She simply listened. Because she knew sometimes, being heard was the first step toward healing. Ethan was 10 now, tall, curious, and bright-eyed. He helped her stack books on weekends, always humming while he worked. The shadows that once lingered in his dreams had faded. When he smiled, it was pure, untouched by the echoes of the life they'd left behind. One Sunday morning, the bell over the bookstore door chimed, its soft sound breaking through the hum of quiet conversation. Alyssa looked up from behind the counter, expecting a familiar face. Instead, her heart stopped. It was Mark, older, thinner, his once perfect hair now streaked with gray. His suit wrinkled, his eyes hollow, carrying a kind of exhaustion that no sleep could fix. He froze too when their eyes met. Time itself seemed to pause. The air grew heavy with memories neither of them wanted to relive. "Alyssa," he said finally, his voice rough, stripped of its old arrogance. "You look different." "I am," she replied, her tone calm, measured, steady. He stepped closer, but she didn't move. "I tried to find you for months. Then I stopped. I figured, maybe you didn't want to be found." "You figured right." Mark gave a bitter smile. "You always were stubborn." Alyssa's lips curved slightly. "No. I just learned that surviving requires more than staying quiet." He looked down at his hands, then around the shop. "This place, what's yours?" "Yes," she said simply. He nodded slowly. "You did it. You really did." She said nothing. The silence between them wasn't the same anymore. It didn't belong to him. After a moment, he pulled something from his pocket, a photograph. Ethan at 6 years old, taken before they left. "I kept this," he said softly. "I don't deserve to, but I did." Alyssa's heart softened just slightly, but not enough to break. "Why are you here, Mark?" she asked finally. He hesitated. "To say I'm sorry. For everything. For every word I twisted, every moment I made you feel small. I don't expect forgiveness. I just needed to see that you're okay." Alyssa studied his face, the man she once loved, the man she once feared, now standing like a stranger in the quiet warmth of her bookstore. "I am," she said. "For the first time in a very long time, I am." Mark's eyes glistened. He nodded, slipping the photo back into his coat. "That's all I needed to know." As he turned to leave, Ethan came running from the back, holding a stack of books. He froze when he saw his father, confusion clouding his small face. "Mom." Alyssa knelt down, placing a gentle hand on Ethan's shoulder. "It's okay, baby. This is someone from the past. He just stopped by to say goodbye." Mark's voice trembled. "You've grown, buddy." Ethan looked at him carefully, then nodded once, polite but distant, like a child greeting a stranger who shares a faint shadow of memory. Mark smiled weakly, eyes full of something unspoken, then turned and walked out into the drizzle. The bell chimed again, and the door closed softly behind him. Alyssa stood still for a long moment, listening to the fading sound of footsteps. There was no anger left, no hatred, only quiet closure. The wound had healed, the scar remained, but it no longer hurt to touch. That night, after closing the shop, Alyssa and Ethan walked down to the pier. The sea shimmered beneath the moonlight, calm and endless. Ethan leaned against the railing, his hair dancing in the wind. "Mommy," he said suddenly, "that man today, he was my dad, right?" Alyssa nodded slowly. "Yes, sweetheart." He was quiet for a moment, then asked, "Do you hate him?" She looked out over the water, her reflection rippling beneath the stars. No, she said finally. I don't hate him. Hating him would mean I'm still carrying him with me. And I'm done carrying the past. Ethan nodded, though he didn't fully understand. But one day, he would. Can we go home now? He asked softly. Alyssa smiled. Yes, baby. Let's go home. They walked back through the quiet streets, hand in hand. The city lights shimmered against the wet pavement, and the sound of the sea followed them like a lullaby. When they reached their apartment, Ethan went straight to bed. Alyssa stood by the window, watching the rain begin again, soft, silver, endless. For years, she'd feared storms. But now, the rain meant renewal. It was no longer the sound of sorrow. It was the sound of living, of letting go. She whispered to herself, we made it. And for the first time in her life, she truly believed it. Epilogue. 5 years later, the shop was busier now. Second chances had become a haven for people seeking warmth, not just from coffee, but from kindness. Alyssa had written a small book, When the Rain Ends, sharing her story under a pen name. It became quietly popular, finding its way into the hands of women who needed it most. Ethan was 15, tall and bright, with his mother's quiet strength. On rainy days, he'd help run the counter, joking that the rain always brings the best readers. One afternoon, he pointed at a framed quote on the wall, one Alyssa had written years ago. Freedom isn't running away, it's walking forward without fear. He smiled and said, That's your line, right, Mom? Alyssa laughed softly. Yes, baby. That's mine. Outside, the rain began to fall again, gentle, endless, alive, and as she stood by the window, the light breaking through the clouds, Alyssa whispered to herself, after every storm, there's always light. And this time the light was hers.